Our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is, for the most part, loved by the citizens of New York City and respected in the eyes of his superhero peers. The thing is, Spider-Man can actually be defeated pretty easy, so let's look into his flaws. But before we start looking into all the weaknesses of our favorite web slinger, subscribe to CBR and web blast that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss any of our MCU videos. The common cold. Peter Parker may be affected by a radioactive spider, but for the most part, his physiology stays relatively human. Like any other human on Earth, Spider-Man is still susceptible to diseases. One that is particularly nasty is the common cold. Unfortunately, a dose of NyQuil isn't going to do the trick, and a cold isn't a great scenario for Spider-Man. He gets tired more easily, and even his spider powers are affected. His wall crawling becomes noticeably limited. This also affects his concentration, and sometimes he'll fall mid-swing. Part of the side effects are that he loses accuracy and intensity in his spider sense, one of his greatest powers. With this dulled, he can't react as quickly to some of those tight situations that call for split-second decisions. Spider-Man basically can't ever afford to get sick. Plus, who can afford cold medicine in New York City nowadays? Venom. The Venom symbiote was originally Peter's, coming back with him to Earth after his time during the Secret Wars. During this time, we learned all about Peter and his needs as Spider-Man. When it broke from him and bonded with the scornful Eddie Brock, they both have reason and means to destroy Spider-Man. The suit provides Eddie a copy of Peter's powers, such as wall crawling, as well as enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes. It also makes its own organic webbing, which was great for Peter as he didn't need to continue to expend web cartridges. The most deadly of these powers the symbiote has over Peter is the fact that the symbiote can hide from spider senses. Venom can easily sneak up and deal a major blow to Spider-Man, and this effect is granted to Venom's offspring as well, such as Carnage. It's safe to say Peter always needs his A game around the symbiote. They are Venom. Ethylchloride. Ethylchloride, commonly seen in dealings involving pesticides, is a silver bullet to Spider-Man. It's used initially by Spencer Smythe, a professor who's an older enemy of Peter's. He's the scientist who created the Spider Slayers, a group of robots that have the sole purpose of defeating Spider-Man. Fortunately, Spider-Man's smarts save him from the Slayers, but that's just on a physical level. Ethylchloride is a different story. When exposed to this compound, Spider-Man begins to have his powers nullified, and then it gets worse. The ethylchloride has a continuous effect on Peter. It keeps wearing down on him the longer he's around it. It seems like an easy way to take Spider-Man down, but thankfully, we don't see it all the time. That would be super unfair to always see Spider-Man get knocked out in one way every issue. Can you say, boring? Weaponized gases. Spider-Man, with many foes, has been gassed or taken to areas where the fumes are too toxic for Peter to handle. And it's not that he isn't smart enough to dodge gas, it's that his mask is fabric thin. It does nothing to stop harmful things from being breathed into his lungs. Take the 2002 Spider-Man movie. Green Goblin shows up at the Daily Bugle. After a little quip, Spider-Man's immediately dosed with knockout gas and is carried away by Goblin on his glider. Peter didn't regain control of his body until Norman Osborn did a traditional supervillain monologue and headed out. That could have spelled out real trouble for Spider-Man if Goblin wasn't just out to make a deal. Spider-Man's gotta put something in that mask or he's going to run into something that'll stop that breathing for good. Or at least until he wakes up. Antivenom. As we know, Eddie Brock is the most recognizable Venom. We just saw him in his own movie debut this past October with Tom Hardy. But for a while, in the comics, the symbiote and Eddie parted ways. Unfortunately, this doesn't last too long, as Eddie is cancer-stricken. Things don't stay horrible for Eddie though, because he crosses paths with Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, who you might recognize from the PS4 game. With this negative energy, he charges the latent symbiote particles left in his system. It re-energizes the symbiote, giving it a new color and new powers, making it anti-venom. How does this affect Spidey? Well, the antivenom cures a lot of diseases and ailments, including radioactivity. When Peter gets inside of its range, his powers are negated. Yikes! And to make matters worse, if antivenom gets its claws into Peter, it can cure him of being Spider-Man permanently. It pays to do what a spider can, but stay away from antivenom or you can't. Girlfriends. Peter may come from the stereotypical nerd world before becoming Spider-Man, but that doesn't mean he isn't charming with the ladies. Much like real-world teenagers who gain confidence after joining the football team, Spider-Man does wonders for Peter's dating life. But it's hard to maintain healthy relationships when you're worried about their safety. He's not batting 1,000 when it comes to the overall relationship. His high school sweetheart, Gwen Stacy, unfortunately, is the example for Peter as to what can happen in this line of work. His forever girl, Mary Jane Watson, while also brave and adventurous in her own right, is also very kidnappable. Most of Spider-Man's roster has in some way either kidnapped, tortured, or intimidated Mary Jane. Then there's his relationship with the burglar vigilante Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat. While they may have much in common and both make their way along the sides of walls, she often takes advantage of Peter's emotions, leading him into dangerous situations. Here's hoping it doesn't end badly for him anymore. Water. In another edition of Peter Parker Still Has Human Physiology, we have to mention a common weakness that not just Spider-Man has: water. Even though he has a great power for keeping out of water, you know, being able to crawl on walls and web sling, it doesn't mean he'll always get what he wants. None of us want to watch Spidey drown, so we root for him when he faces foes that are completely made of water, like the villain Hydro Man. It's not just the lack of air that we're worried about. Occasionally, Spider-Man will carry important items or crucial pieces of technology on him that don't mix well with water. You don't want any crucial tech to get short-circuited, especially both of the web shooters. Yeah, that's a big one. This one seems pretty simple for Peter. Stay out of the water, webhead. Radiation. Radioactivity goes hand in hand during the creation of Spider-Man in the first place, but that doesn't grant him a total immunity from it. First off, the radioactivity in Peter's system isn't strong enough compared to the likes of an atomic or a nuclear weapon. It's enough to facilitate spider powers. However, as a normal human, a lot of radioactivity can be harmful to the body. But what's horrible for Peter is that too much radioactivity can remove his spider powers. We see this during the Ben Reilly Clone Saga. Towards the end, Peter ends up getting his powers from, you guessed it, too much radioactivity. At this point, Ben Reilly officially took over as the Scarlet Spider, Spider-Man. As a rule of thumb, you shouldn't put yourself around anything nuclear or radioactive without protection, or you might just find yourself in a sticky situation like Peter did. The normal spider suit. We can't get too mad at this entry. As we've seen for more than 50 years, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The it we're referring to is that classic red and blue costume. One of the perks that the Spider-Man costume has is that it completely covers Peter from head to toe, concealing his identity. However, for a lot of Peter's run as Spidey, that's where the classic outfit lives and dies. As an outfit, it typically doesn't have any enhancements to help Peter out with fighting enemies. Sure, he has his trusty web shooters. It doesn't come with padding or a gel mesh for protection, nor does it have inner brass knuckles for extra damage. It's just fabric. That doesn't help with concealing identity either. In almost every major screen appearance of Spider-Man, half of his mask gets destroyed and his face is exposed. What we're saying in this instance is maybe a helmet instead of a mask. Aunt May. Probably the biggest entry on this list, hands down, goes to someone a part of the Spider-Man mythos since day one. The late widow to Ben Parker, it's May Parker, more affectionately known as Aunt May. May and Ben officially took in Peter after his parents' death, and they helped foster a lot of Pete's talents from a young age, teaching him important lessons along the way, but once he got spider powers, he learned a different yet mighty important life lesson: with great power comes great responsibility. After Ben's death, it was just Peter and May looking out for each other. Peter puts Aunt May's safety over his own and a lot of his romantic relationships as well. Not just because he wants to keep her safe and cared for since she's his aunt, but because she didn't know he was Spider-Man for a very long time. May does learn about Spider-Man eventually, and it doesn't end Peter's world like he thought it would. May is the closest person to Peter that villains can exploit, so by all means, Peter, keep Aunt May for as long as you can. Those were just some of Spider-Man's many weaknesses, yet he still finds a way to kick butt in NYC. Do you think that we missed a weakness? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU videos like this one. Thanks for watching.